I wanted to share a few thoughts about the English poet John Dryden, who was around in the latter half of the 1600s. He's sort of seen as one of the greats of English poetry, but perhaps isn't really read, certainly not in school, as far as I remember. And he's a sort of fascinating figure to me as one of the poets most obviously shackled to history. I mean, from my perspective, all poetry is in some way very much related to the historical time they were written in. But with John Dryden, it's really very obvious. So one of his earliest poems is a eulogy on the occasion of Oliver Cromwell's death, which he extols the man's virtues as a great leader. But upon the Restoration, when Charles II became king, Dryden changed his tune and wrote some very sycophantic poetry about the monarch, and was very critical of the Commonwealth. And then this sort of changeability really just continued. So he wrote a longer poem called Religio Laici, if my non-existent Latin is correct there. Sort of a kind of apologetic, a defence of the Church of England against the Puritans who wanted to reform it by getting rid of the bishops, for example, or some of the more ceremonial aspects of the church. He was trying to defend the Church of England as the middle way between Puritanism and Roman Catholicism. And yet, by the time of James II, who was a Roman Catholic, Dryden had decided to convert to the Roman Church and wrote an even longer apologetic for Roman Catholicism called The Hind and the Panther, in which these two animals representing Roman Catholicism and Protestantism have a long debate about whose tradition holds the truth. He was the poet laureate, so the official poet of England, and it's almost vulgar Marxism in action, where a very sort of crude relation between someone's economic conditions and their thinking and beliefs seems very straightforward, but is pretty interesting because of that. Now, when James II was himself deposed by the Glorious Revolution, as it's known, King William, Queen Mary, who got rid of him, took the throne, and ensured that any future monarchs had to be Protestant and not Catholic. Dryden did stick to his beliefs as they were, and pretty quickly lost the post of poet laureate. Many have said that he is in some ways very much foreshadowing the poetry of the 1700s. It's all rhyming couplets, usually long blocks of rhyming couplets with the occasional triplet, in a way that obviously Alexander Pope would take up. So in some ways it sounds sort of less profound, so to speak, than John Milton, for example, who wrote in iambic pentameter and blank verse, most famously in Paradise Lost. In some ways is an easier read, perhaps, but many of his poems do demand a certain background knowledge of the times, as I've kind of sketched out, to understand. But that can be rewarding in itself, to encourage you to look more into those things. I suppose his example can only make me think over my own life and the way my own changing perspectives have been related to the circumstances I was in. Quite often that seems fairly obvious to me now, and gives some food for thought as to what is behind our beliefs and perspectives. So that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.